And the National Union of Mine Workers is commemorating the 100-year anniversary of the Russian Revolution. The NUMSA Research and Policy Institute will be exploring the commemorative and political educational dimensions of the Russian Revolution through the Red Century film screenings. A series of political dialogues will be taking place throughout the week. On the 24th of October 1917, the peasants, working class and disaffected soldiers in Russia overthrew the centuries-old system of Tsarist rule. Up until then, Russia, the Tsars, was one of history's most terrible dictatorships. The vast majority of Russians labored under severe oppression and were subject to the iron rule of regime and the nobility. Well, joining me here in studio to further unpack the Red Century film screenings is NUMSA acting spokesperson Pagamile Hlubi. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
Please give us a breakdown of what we can expect during this event.
Okay, sure. We really appreciate that you are having that you have given us this opportunity to tell us a little more about our celebrations. The National Union of Metal Workers of South Africa has made a decision to commemorate the 100-year anniversary of the Russian Revolution, which took place in 1917. This was a very significant moment in history. It was a real example or real evidence of genuine transformation. What took place in Russia in 1917 was a complete transformation of Russian society. For the first time, you had ordinary workers being in control of the state, ordinary workers being in control of the economy, ordinary workers being in control of the modes of production. And it was a hugely significant event. In modern terms, it can be equated to a situation where an ordinary worker has the same status as the chairperson of a board of a multinational corporation. That's what took place in Russia in 1917. And as NUMSA, we believe that it's very important for the working class to celebrate and to mark this moment in history, because it speaks volumes about what can be achieved when the working class is united with a common goal.
So given South Africa's political landscape today, I mean, how relevant is that to our context heading up to elective conference and obviously elections in 2019?
Well, in this particular context, it becomes even more important for the working class to reflect on this historic moment and to also reflect on what the working class in Russia achieved over 100 years ago. Many people might presume that this kind of commemoration is outdated, but in fact, the situation that was facing Russian workers at that time, in many ways, is similar to what the South African working class is facing. The South African working class in South Africa is under the oppression of capital, under the oppression, it's suffering under the burden of neoliberal institutions. The working class globally is frustrated by the impact of capitalism and neoliberal economic policies. I'm sure you're aware of the amount of unrest that we've seen in different parts of the world, whether it's Spain, whether it's in South Africa, where workers are fighting for more and for improved living conditions, because we now know that capitalism and its neoliberal economic agenda do not have the solution for the working class. And so effectively, it's really important for the South African working class right now to take a moment and reflect on what would be possible if we were united. If you look at the South African context, for example, the challenge that the working class faces is that you have the battles that are going on within the governing party of the ANC. You've got factions represented by Pravin Gordhan on the one side, Pravin Gordhan and Cyril Ramaphosa on the one side, versus Jacob Zuma and his cronies on the other side, all of them battling for control of the fiscus. None of them have any interest in the working class whatsoever. And it's particularly important that at this point in time, the working class in South Africa must unite in its own interests to fight in order to achieve the kind of things, the kind of South Africa that they would wish to see for the benefit of the working class in this country.
I mean, the concepts of Leninism and Marxism, etc., how important, how relevant do you think it is to South Africa, perhaps going forward, seen as currently capitalism isn't really the answer going forward, assisting everyone at this point, yeah?
Well, you know, even if, just to give you an example, if you read the Freedom Charter is actually an expression of the Communist Manifesto. When workers demand free, quality, higher education, when they demand free, quality, universal access to healthcare, when they demand ownership of the means of production, when they call for nationalization of the land and the banks, that is precisely what socialism, what communism is demanding. And we know that for the last 23 years, we've implemented capitalism, we've implemented neoliberal economic policies. They've failed. The levels of poverty in South Africa, we're now at a point where more than 50% of the population is poor, where you've got 35% unemployment rate. Many of the statistics I'm rattling off are a reflection of the socioeconomic conditions which were facing Russian workers 100 years ago. Yeah. The problem we have in South Africa is that the working class in this country is not united. You have COSATU on the one hand, you have, which is pursuing an agenda where workers must continue to support the status quo by supporting the ANC. And then you have, of course, organizations like ourselves, which is NUMSA, which are very clear that on this issue, if we believe in radical economic transformation in the interest of the working class, then the working class needs to break away from organizations like the ANC, break away from organizations like the DA, because none of these organizations have any interest in pursuing a working class agenda. What they're interested in ensuring that the status quo remains so that only the 1% continue to benefit at the expense of the broader working class.
I mean, SAFTU obviously formed because of the perceived, how do we say this, failure of existing unions perhaps that were servicing members. How can unions come together and perhaps better service workers, focus on the bigger picture of that economic emancipation for all?
Well, the creation of SAFTU was essentially to respond directly to that call and to that issue. Yeah. The purpose of a trade union, number one, is that it must be worker control, and number two, it must be a trade union that operates in the interests of the working class. COSATU, sadly, by virtue of its role within the alliance, by virtue of the fact that part of its role with its association with the governing party, the ANC, is that it is very focused on ensuring that the ANC retains control. It is not as focused on looking at issues that affect workers. I mean, we were part of COSATU as NUMSA. And for the entire time that we were part of COSATU, the ANC government went ahead and implemented labor broking, which for us is modern day slavery. They went ahead and they implemented it. Under COSATU, e-tolls was implemented. So really, the problem is that we needed a federation which was going to work in the interests of the working class. And that's why SAFTU was formed. Yeah. SAFTU is a worker-controlled trade union federation. We're not interested in the politics of any political organization. We are driven only by the agenda of the working class and what it is that the working class seeks to achieve in South Africa.
All right, so events are taking place today up until the 10th of November. What can we expect? Some political dialogues, obviously keynote addresses as well. Walk us through that.
So today will be the first day when we actually launch this commemoration. It will be taking place at Birchwood Conference Center, which is in Ekurhuleni. It's an event where essentially it's NUMSA members celebrating the Russian Revolution. The president of the trade union, Comrade Andrew Chirwa, will be there to make the opening address. And of course, one of the keynote speakers will be the General Secretary of the trade union, Comrade Irvin Jim. He will be there to address our members. And then from Monday up until Friday, we're going to have a series of dialogues. We're going to have a book launch. We're going to have film screenings. And in each and every one of those sessions, it's an opportunity to engage about the challenges facing the working class. What are the solutions? What are the real modern day solutions for the working class today in South Africa? And also, it's an opportunity to unpack what were the problems of communism, you know. Yeah. We're talking about the system that we want to implement in our lifetime, but we want to make sure that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past. So those are all the conversations that we're going to be having this week. And also, of course, looking at modern day examples of countries which were successful in implementing a socialist agenda, countries like Cuba, for example. So really, we urge all South Africans to come and participate. It's an open platform. It doesn't matter what your political or ideological affiliation is. We would welcome the engagement with you. We are that kind of trade union. And of course, we hope to see ANN7 there today.
Right, let's leave it there. Of course, Pakamile Hlubi, she's the NUMSA national spokesperson, chatting to us about the Red Centenary celebrations that will be taking place throughout the week.